What's up, everybody, and welcome back. Welcome back to the Bridging the Gap podcast. I'm filming today with the door closed. Now, usually I record. I record with my. You don't know my. I realize you don't know the room that I'm in. Okay, so let me picture the room right. So I'm sat at my kitchen table, which is why there's probably a little bit of reverb because this kitchen's not soundproof. But the way that sound works is you're speaking into a microphone, like I'm speaking into the microphone right now, but some of these sound waves are going to go around the microphone and they're going to hit the walls and they're going to bounce back and they're going to be picked up by the microphone. So usually I try and speak away from the face of my Mac into the gap, and I also open the doors so that the sound can be dispersed. Today it's too cold, so you've got a reverberating voice. It's probably not reverberating, it's quite a good mic, so hopefully you can hear no reverb. So anyway, let's get into the podcast. Today I wanted to talk about when to change your training program, because I think there's a lot of people that ask that question. And what is the answer? Like, when should you change? What training program should you do? Should you change every single session? Should you change every week, every 4 weeks? Here's my input on it. Now, I'm not saying this is the right input. This is just how I see it. When you start a movement, when you start an exercise, let's say you write a program, right? You do a push-pull legs. It's irrelevant, right? The style is irrelevant. The split is irrelevant. But let's say you do a push-pull legs, and you've set all your programs out, and then you start that session. What happens in those first couple of sessions? You think these don't feel right. They don't feel that nice. I'm not super sturdy in the movement. Maybe you've gone from dumbbell presses to barbell, and that barbell is shaking all over the place. Well, guess what? If you were to change from doing that movement to something else the following week, you'd probably feel the same. That feeling is just all of your stabilizers, your muscles moving in a pattern that's new to them. And they're kind of flickering because they don't know how to stay taut, they don't know how to stay tight, they don't know how to keep you safe because they're learning. And this is part of that movement pattern process that I talk about sometimes. And you need to spend a pretty decent amount of time forging a motor pattern. Forging that movement into your brain, right? Once you've learned the ability to squat, you can pretty much squat on anything, right? But it doesn't mean that it's going to be stable every time you go to a squat. For example, when I moved to a barbell squat during lockdown, it was crazy. It was really, really difficult. I couldn't find my balance. I couldn't find my sweet spot. But you all know about a sweet spot, right? You've all hit that sweet rep or that sweet set or that sweet workout where you've been like, ooh, just hit the spot, everything flowed. Well, that comes when you're very, very good at the skill that you're performing. And the only way to get good at that skill is to perform it over and over again. So taking that into consideration, you can probably draw the conclusion that you need to do more than one session, because that first session is dodgy. That second session gets a little bit better. But by that third, that fourth, and that fifth session of doing those same exercises, your body has learned the movements, your body's become very efficient at those movements, and your body has become great at staying stable and staying safe in that position. Then you have the ability to overload that, because you can't really overload when the skill isn't up to par, up to scratch, right? So you've got a bench press, you're wobbling everywhere, you can't control that eccentric properly. You've got to wait until that is proper before you can start to progress it. So a lot of people that are changing their sessions every Monday they do chest, but they do a different chest session. You never get efficient at a movement, if that makes sense. And now a lot of this will be central nervous system adaptation. So we'll use that same scenario just for argument's sake. We take you from a barbell press, which is super stable, fixed bar, to dumbbell, and where you can move, free moving. It's going to be unstable, and that's pretty normal. So what's going to happen there is that your central nervous system is going to go, whoa, whoa, whoa. What is this? What is this movement? We need to adapt. We need to adapt quickly. So, you've got one session and you kind of go, what's going on? You get into that second session, your brain goes, we remember this a little bit. Did we do this the last week? I think we did this last week. So you get a little bit better at it. And then you go the following week. No, we definitely did this last week. So you get better at it. But then, so that initial central nervous system adaptation is going to improve your stability, but it's also going to improve your strength. Once you've central nervous systemly adapted, there's not even a sentence, I know. But once your central nervous system has adapted to that movement, you now can push that forward. You now can start to chase the progress, because You've got the stability, you've got the safety, you've got the efficiency. Now you've got to progressively overload it. And the only way to progressively overload it is by building more tissue. Yes, to a certain extent, you will get stronger and stronger with central nervous system adaptation. But if we combine the progressive overload and varying different rep ranges with a calorie surplus, we're going to determine muscle growth. Which is why you can get super, super, super strong powerlifters, but aren't that big. You know, the 75 kilo, the 80 kilo powerlifters are fucking crazy body weight to strength ratio. And that's because strength doesn't necessarily entirely build muscle. It definitely has an impact, but it's not like the sole effect on muscle building, which is something else that you need to consider. So let's say you've got your push-pull legs set up, you've had your first couple of weeks, and you're now stable, you're now efficient, you're now good at these movements. You've got a couple rotations of each, so you're not just bench pressing with a flat bar every single week. You've got dumbbells maybe one week, or you've got a cable press the next week, or whatever the other machines are. I can't barely remember them since not being in the gym. You really do want to try and exhaust these movements, or at least try and get like to 90% of exhausting that movement. And the way I like to measure that is just a lot of it is internal feel, and this is the hard part about coaching, is that you need to be able to teach your client how to feel, how to make the connection between a shit movement, energy dwindling, not feeling great, and progress slowing, and letting them understand when a set feels great and letting them understanding when a set feels shit. And you've got to teach them that, because for me, I'm not really going to take a movement out unless it really, really, really needs to go. And for me personally, like it really does take a while. I mean, I've been known to run exercises for 16, 20 weeks, 4 or 5 months without changing, because the progress has been there. If it's there, you've got to take it. You know, ultimately, we are dealt with only so many exercises that we can do. So, you know, changing your hack squat to reverse banding hack squat, like, yes, it's going to relieve a little bit of that pressure of just doing that same exercise every single time, but it's still transferring over to fatigue, right? So a lot of changing training really is determined by your fatigue and your accumulation. Brain's not firing today. The accumulation of fatigue. Not necessarily because the movement doesn't work for you. Most movements work with most people. Don't get me wrong, biomechanically you may not be able to do X, Y, and Z, so you don't do them. But once you've got something, you are generally pretty sound, and there'll be a reason why you can't progress. And more often than not, it's not that you've quote unquote exhausted the movement, it's just quote unquote you've exhausted yourself. You've built up fatigue, so you need to deload, right? So this is why you've got to have this internal biofeedback of when it just feels right. And don't get me wrong, there are times when you can just fucking be in a surplus and be not fatigued, and everything else is rising and everything else feels good. And that's for you to understand as well. You need to know, if everything else is going well, why is this single exercise not working? Maybe that's a cause for change, you know? So you've got to understand these. So to bring this into summary, when would you change your program? Generally speaking, anywhere from 8 to 16 weeks, based off the accumulation of fatigue that you get. You know, if you accumulate fatigue really, really quickly, you're going to have to drop it out and deload after about 8 weeks. If you don't accumulate fatigue very, very quickly and you've running really well, you're recovering really, really well, run it for as long as you physically can, and it's no big deal if you can't. Obviously, you've got to think about your training program set up to be kind of economical in terms of energy, so you couldn't just have 5 sessions of fucking deadlifts. Do you know what I mean? So you've got to think about that. So there is no reason why you couldn't set a training program, run that for 2 or 3 weeks, and realize that actually, you know what, I need to move this RDL from first to last, or I need to move it from last to first because I'm fatiguing, or because it's stopping me from doing X, Y, and Z. This is another thing that you need to connect. Maybe, for example, really, really good client who determined this of himself. We've only been together a few weeks as well. He said, bro, when I'm doing these RDLs, I'm putting so much into it. I get to my bent over row, my lower back is just absolutely fried, and I don't know, I can't get what I need to get out on this row. I said, okay, let's just take this RDL out. Let's move it towards the end, bro. This is perfect. My back is on fire. I can get much more out of my lats. You are getting more out of your lats now because you've put a more energy efficient exercise, a less energy efficient exercise in being RDLs or a rack pull, which is super compensating, super taxing, and you just moved it away from that bulk of work that you want to get through in that isolation, and you've moved it to the end. So there's no reason why you can't change your training program because it's not set up right. There's no reason why you can't change a program because it doesn't feel right. I'm a big believer in the fact that you shouldn't be changing your training program based off keeping the muscle guessing or keeping variety there or trying to chase different angles of a muscle. Ultimately, muscles work very, very similarly to one another. You can't isolate one portion of it, but you can bias certain tissues, and there will be movements that you can bias. So for example, when you bench press on the incline, you don't just use your upper chest, you use your entire chest, you just bias your upper chest. So there is no reason why you can't change accordingly. So let me wrap this up. This has been 10 minutes or 11 minutes. When should you change your training program? You should change it when you've accumulated enough fatigue in the movements for you to warrant a deload, and then you could look to get some different angles on there and some different stimulus. It's not really crazy to think about. You can exhaust the movement, but just make sure it's the movement that's exhausted and not you. So key marker is everything else moving? Yes. Is this one single movement not working? Or maybe this 1 to 3 movements not working? Yes. All right, let's change it and let's see if anything happens. Ultimately, change one thing, assess the damage, assess the response, and then go again. If you change 2, 3, 4, 5 things at once, it's very, very difficult to track what that difference made. So maybe, you know what, you've got too much spinal loading, you RDL one day, you rack pull another day, you squat another day, and you're just like, your body just feels wrecked. So maybe you drop an RDL off. Is that someone at the door? Yes, it is. Hang on. So ultimately, it comes down to you in terms of the actual individual exercise, whether it works. But most people just don't stick to it long enough. You know what? If it's a fucking weak movement, you got to make it a strong movement. I didn't deadlift for ages. Still don't deadlift, but I didn't do a deadlift form for ages. I didn't RDL, I didn't rack pull, because guess what? My back hurt and it was a weak point. Well, that was a mistake, and I had to stay strong. And you got to take that fucking weight down, and you got to try again, because most movements will fit you, and they will be fine. If it's really, really weak, you can't fucking deadlift, and it really hurts, and you can't get more than 100 kilos in the bar, don't put more than 100 kilos in the bar and just exhaust it that way. So that's when you should change your training program. I hope that makes sense. If you've got any questions on when you should change, just drop me a DM, Instagram, Josh Bushman, and we'll help you out.